Hi, and thanks for joining me. I did say in a recent vlog that I was going to look back at my first year of boat ownership. I'm going to look at the things that I needed to do when I purchased the boat, things that have gone wrong or haven't gone right. I had spent a while looking around at boats and seen quite a few at different marinas. I actually found my boat at Wilton Marina in November 2017. Having made a decision to purchase, I then arranged for it to be surveyed, and I would advise anyone buying a boat to ensure you have a survey done. The survey was done in the middle of December, and the final completion of purchase was in the middle of January. On the actual survey day it was very icy. The marina had had the forethought to take the boat out of the water first. I believe usually the surveyor looks at the boat in the water and then it comes out of the water, but knowing that the slipway was going to be very icy, the marina had decided to take the boat out the night before, which was very handy. I had arranged to meet the surveyor on site from the outset, and that was very kind of him to let me join him. When I arrived at the marina, a boat was just covered in ice. I hadn't really seen anything like it before, but it was on the slipway ready for the inspection. I didn't actually film the inspection itself, though I did do a little bit of filming later on when the boat was put back into the water. When I received the report, it was clear that there were various things to be done to the boat. Many of these items were undertaken by the marina, but there were still some items that I would need to deal with myself. One of the items recommended by the surveyor was to clean out the water tank, as it was unlikely that it had been cleaned out since the boat was built in 2005. Another thing he strongly recommended was to get the boat blacked, but not just the sides as many do, to get the underside blacked as well. I was very pleased with the work that the marina did on the boat, and I moved it to Yelvertoft Marina the last weekend of January, so that was at the start of 2018. The weekend we chose to move the boat was horrendous, at least the Saturday was. We'd come up on Friday to get ready for the Saturday move. Saturday was an absolutely horrendous day. Couldn't believe it. Non-stop rain. We have a canopy on the back of the boat. Normally we would have taken that down, but we felt we needed the cover. There was some concern as to whether we would get under all the bridges, but in the end that proved not to be a problem. Wilton Marina is at the foot of the Buckley flight, 7 locks in all. The canal rises through the flight. Most of the locks were set against us. It turned out in fact that 5 of the locks were set against us. It was just horrendous. I can't really explain what a miserable day that Saturday was. The good thing is we really enjoyed the move. You know, we weren't fazed by anything. We just had a great time moving the boat. We stopped overnight at the top lock and had our evening meal in the pub there. Sunday was a totally different day. At Norton Junction we had to make the turn onto the Grand Union Canal Leicester line. Although it was a lovely day, it was very windy, and obviously I'm still very new to handling a boat, so found that a little bit difficult. Anyway, we came up to Watford Locks. The sun was beating down. It was so different from the day before. Glorious sunshine, in fact really too bright for photography. A lot of shadows, and it was just really bright. Anyway, I did start at that point doing a little bit of filming of the boat going through the locks. We were advised by the volunteer lock keepers who were on duty that it would be a good idea to take the canopy down. We hadn't done that before, and they helped us with that, which was very good of them. So the canopy was taken down. The actual canopy itself was stowed away inside, but the two main hoops were just rested on the back of the tiller. That proved not to be a very good idea, as heading northwards we had to go through Crick Tunnel. And while we were going through the tunnel, I suppose we weren't fully prepared. We knew it was going to be dark, obviously, and we used the light on the front of the boat, and it had been suggested we have the internal lights of the boat on. And as we went through the tunnel, I struggled to steer the boat. I actually thought something had gone wrong. I didn't like to say anything to my partner, didn't want to cause any worry in the tunnel. It was only when we came out into the daylight that I could see what had happened. One of the hoops had got caught on the back of the tiller, so as I tried to steer, the tiller wouldn't move. So at least that problem was resolved. We carried on up to the marina. We arrived about 4 o'clock Sunday afternoon. It was still light but beginning to fade. So that was how I came to be at Yelvertoft Marina. One matter that needed to be resolved that hadn't been whilst I was at Wilton Marina and the works were being done was to establish whether the immersion heater was working or not. Because the engine had been run, the water had got hot anyway, and it hadn't proved possible to know whether it was actually working. I did some tests on the immersion and I established that it wasn't working. So Wilton Marina sent up an electrician to change it, which he did. I always had a suspicion that there was a leak somewhere, because there was always water in the engine bay. When I'd first seen the boat in November, I was rather surprised that the engine bay was dry, drier than I would have expected. It was bone dry at the time. But now there was always a little bit of water floating about there. And then the first incident occurred. I was having a shower one morning, and I suddenly became aware that the water wasn't being pumped out of the boat, it was going straight underneath. And what had happened was the outlet pipe connected to the outlet of the shower had come loose. So the water was going straight into the bottom of the boat. As this was shortly after I'd come to Yelvertoft, I contacted Wilton Marina about it, and they agreed to send out an electrician and a plumber to have a look and see what had gone wrong. Well, the day they were due to come, they were late. And when I inquired where were they, I was told they can't get in the marina. There is a boat blocking the entrance. Not the entrance from the canal. The driveway from the road into the marina was blocked by a boat on a low loader, so they couldn't come that day. That was a Friday, so I had to wait over the weekend for them to come back on the Monday, which they did. One of the jobs that had been done was to replace the shower tray. And obviously when the shower tray was out, it was easy to make the connection to the outlet and then subsequently attach it to the pump. Now, of course, with the shower in situ, there was no means of getting to the outlet. So the plumber had to cut a trap in the floor to enable access to be given. And that job was soon done. I still, though, had a doubt about the immersion heater and whether it was 100% watertight, but I'll come back to that later. At the beginning of March, I returned to the boat, and obviously when I leave the boat I shut the water down, switch the pumps off and sort of winterize it as best as I can. I came back to the boat and I was doing my routine, switching the water back on the pumps, and as soon as I switched the pumps on, I heard water rushing. I didn't immediately think anything of it, as I thought I'd left the tap open when I'd shut everything down previously. But it wasn't that. What had actually happened was the shower was running, and yet the shower was off, and yet there was water pouring out of it. I thought, well, how can that be? Anyway, this was a bit of a shock to me. I had a word with the marina office, and they suggested that I take out the shower fitting, take out the shower fitting and have a look at it. And so I did that. It was a good job that I had a Stilson with me, a very large wrench, because the nut was enormous. It took me quite a lot of fiddling and banging and one thing and another to get the shower control unit out, but eventually I managed to do that. Once I had taken the shower apart, I could see there were a couple of problems, but I wasn't sure whether they were causing the issue that I was having. There's a little diaphragm which was split, allowing water into it, so I thought that might have been having an effect. And also there's like a spinner thing which had one of its teeth was slightly bent. Anyway, I took the shower control unit up to the office, and one of the guys there had a look at it, managed to take it apart, and he found a piece of grit was stopping the shower mechanism from closing properly. And with the grit there, whether it was switched on or off, it was going to run with water. So fortunately that was cured. I seem to recall it was a Thursday. I needed to order some spare parts. I did that the same day, and they came on the Friday, and I was able to reassemble everything. So I was quite pleased about that. An issue I had had whilst at Wilton was that I opened the side hatch. It's not as large as many on boats, but there is a hatch there with a couple of small doors, and I'd opened it. I couldn't get it shut again because the lining to the hatch was sodden and it wasn't performing properly, and the security within the hatch, the bolts and everything, were loose, and I couldn't pull it in to close it off. So that was high on my list as something that needed to be attended to. So in April I set to with that task. I had already measured up the inserts and got some timber cut. In fact, not timber, it was actually plywood. I wish I could say it was marine ply, but it wasn't. I found a place who very kindly allowed me to buy a small piece of ply at a reasonable price, and they cut it to size. So I had the two inserts for the doors cut to size. Unfortunately, as I later found out, they just needed a slight bit of trimming to make them fit. So that was one of the first jobs I tackled on the boat, sorting out the hatch doors. The inserts, which I had thought would have been plywood, actually turned out to be a sort of fibreboard, and obviously once the water had got into that, they were gone, so both had to be replaced. So I was quite pleased, having achieved renewal of the hatch inserts, my first proper job on the boat. In May, when my partner and I were on the boat, there was a sudden scream from the shower. Water was spurting out, but not from the shower. Another problem. The boat originally had a built-in toilet, which was a flush toilet. When I bought the boat, that toilet was no longer there, and a new porta potty was in its place. The pipe that fed the old toilet was still there, and I hadn't actually given it a lot of thought. It was a rubber braided pipe, and in one end had been pushed something like a bolt and then a Jubilee clip put on it. Well, the pipe had split and water spurting out the end of it. My way of resolving that was to use one of those clamps that you use on brake pipes when you're doing a job on the car to stop the flow of brake fluid. Just happened to have one of those with me, and I fitted that to the pipe, which stopped it. I then cut off the end of the pipe and put back this stopper thing and tightened up the Jubilee clip. And since then it's been okay. It's not the best fix in the world, but it is working, so I've left it alone. It's a little bit fiddly for me to get into the cupboard where the pipe is and disconnect it and blank it off, so I haven't gone there with that yet. In February I had arranged for the boat to be blacked at Debdow Wharf, and I had arranged it for the start of July. So at the beginning of July I came to the boat with a view of taking it up to Debdow Wharf, which is just north of Foxton Locks, a couple of miles beyond there. So the boat was taken there, and I did a separate vlog on that actually, which is quite interesting to watch. I'll put a separate link to that below. The blacking was done by a single guy using his hoist and gantry. He made the boat effectively sing and dance, moving it upwards, sideways, downwards, every which way. First of all he had to give it a good hosing down with a pressure washer, make sure it was clean and ready to take the blacking. When that was done he started and gave it the first coat, and all that was achieved by 1 o'clock in the morning. It was then given a second coat later in the afternoon, and what I haven't said of course was that July was one of the hottest on record. I think very often they say you leave them overnight between coats, but it was really very hot. The guy was very thorough in what he did. I was very pleased with the job that was done, which of course included the underside. The surveyor had recommended the underside be done, as I've only got an 8mm bottom. A lot of narrow boats have a 10mm steel plate at the bottom. Mine is only 8mm. It's not going to suddenly rust out or anything like that, but there was some pitting in it, and the surveyor thought it would be a good idea to get the bottom of the boat blacked. He did say it would rub off, but it would stay in the pits. There seem to be different thoughts about this, because I have heard it suggested that if you black the bottom of the boat, it will stay. But if you are scraping along the canals, which sometimes happen when water levels are low, I'm sure that any blacking would get rubbed off. Perhaps not all of it, but I'm sure it would spoil the surface. The main concern with blacking, of course, is to treat the sides of the boat which get wet and are exposed to air, because that is what causes the rusting. When steel is underwater all the time, it's not such a problem. When I eventually got back to the marina, I decided to tackle the job that I had not been looking forward to, which was the water tank clean. Again, this has been documented, and I'll put a link to the video below. I was fortunate that it was very hot. It allowed things to dry out very quickly. First of all, I had to drain the tank, remove all the rusty sediment that was in it, give it a good clean, then treat the tank with a rust preservative, and then put 2 coats of the bitumen based paint. A very special paint, not any bitumen. This is a special bitumen based paint which is designed for water tanks. The whole job took me 10 days. I allowed 5 days for the tank to dry out following the second coating of bitumen. That was essential to ensure that when I refilled the tank there weren't any little bits of bitumen floating in the water, and I've not had any problems with that. Having got the water tank clean out of the way, I started thinking about what other jobs need to be done. My boat has proper handrails on either side. The trad and semi-trad boats, the sides of those tend to go up, so you have more of a lip to hold on to, whereas my boat has proper handrails, and the uprights that supported those were going rusty, so I thought, right, I'll tackle the handrail on the side that I have easy access to, and I started rubbing that down, treating it and painting it. So that was one job that was worth doing. I later on did the other side as well. I had to move the boat round to the slipway to do that, so I got access on the other side. In fact, you're not allowed to do, external work on your boats in the marina. They prefer you to go out on the canal or use the slipway. With the handrails done, I then decided that as the well deck was a bit messy, particularly following doing the water tank, that I would do some painting in the well deck and the actual peak of the bow. So did some more painting there. And then a week or so later I did some work in the engine compartment. This was something else that the surveyor had recommended. The engine compartment is a bit messy, and so I made a start on that. I was pretty confident that the weed hatch was reasonably watertight, especially as the guy that did the blacking had sort of tested it when he put everything back together and given it a good rev up forwards and back and so forth. It was only much later that I realised that the weed hatch was not waterproof. I'll come back to that in a minute. So I made a start on tidying up the engine bay, rubbing down, removing a lot of loose rust and so forth. I was working on one side of the engine bay, on the level part over what they call the swim, which is where the boat is shaped towards the back. I was quite pleased with what I'd done. I thought I'd made a start on something that I hadn't really been looking forward to. I wish I had realised far sooner that much of the water getting into the boat was down to the weed hatch not being fully watertight. It only cost me about £6 in materials to fix it, and that's the really annoying thing. My weed hatch was made watertight by a narrow sort of black rubber seal around the top of the box in which the actual hatch cover fits, and also by a wider seal fitted to the underside of the hatch cover. When I went to the chandler's to buy both types of rubber sealing strips, it became clear that it shouldn't have been like that anyway, and I should only have the wide strip around the top or the underside of the hatch itself. What I had actually noticed was that the hatch cover wasn't a good fit when it was in position. Along the back the overlap was very narrow, and that's what I needed to ensure when I replaced the cover. So that was another job that I managed to do. I had to take off the old seal, give it a good rub down, clean it all up, fit the new seal, only one this time, and the result worked, so I'm very pleased that I managed to get that done. Whilst I was on the slipway, I also did some painting on the sides of the bow of the boat. I didn't find it that easy because the ground level was a little bit too high. Also, it was windy and there was a field opposite, and lots of dandelion floaters just kept coming over the boat and attaching. It was a bit of a nightmare, but I was reasonably pleased with what I managed to achieve. In August, my son and grandson came to stay on the boat for a few days, and we took a trip down to Watford Locks. To get to the locks you have to go through Crick Tunnel. When you head southwards through the tunnel, there's a wooden rubbing strip on the right hand side. So when you pass another boat and have to move over, you're likely to rub against that, which is good. It's good that it's there. So we went through and we passed 2 boats in the tunnel, which was fine, no problems. When we came back, the tunnel was very busy and we passed a total of 6 boats. Now the problem when you head north is that there is no wooden rubbing strip. So my boat, when I passed another boat, was actually rubbing against the wall of the tunnel. And the problem with that is that as it's square backed, it hits and damages the little fittings that are used to hold the canopy in place. And not for the first time I had to replace some of these fittings, which is really annoying, because I find when you go through the tunnel, once you're up against the wall, Not having that curved back that many boats have, it is difficult to steer yourself off of it. So that was rather annoying that I had to do that. But I have got a supply of these fittings in stock for when I do need to use them. Whilst my son was with me, we did identify that water was leaking from where the immersion heater was screwed into the top of the hot water cylinder. We tried to tighten it up, but it wasn't very successful. I had bought a proper immersion heater spanner to do it with, but it didn't fit very well. A week later, I woke up in the morning and the electric had tripped out. I didn't know straight away what had caused this, so I did the usual routine of checking various electric appliances, and then I realised it was the immersion heater. So I decided that I would replace the immersion heater. Because the immersion has a cover over the top of it, water was hitting that cover and ponding on the top where the electrical connections are, and had caused them to short circuit. Anyway, I decided that it would be best to buy a new immersion heater. I went to the chandlers for that purpose, and when the immersion heater was put on the counter, I said, well, this is only 1 kilowatt, my existing one is 2 kilowatts. And I was told, well, it's usual for the immersion just to be 1 kilowatt. And I thought, well, that's fine. But there was another benefit as well, which I haven't yet mentioned. When I bought the boat, one of the recommendations by the surveyor, and the marina dealt with it, was that the circuit breaker box needed to be changed, because it was a single trip switch covering all the circuits, and that was wrong. It needed to have a different box put in where you had 2 separate circuits, and that had been done by the marina. Basically, there were 2 circuits, 10 amp and 6 amp, protected by trip switches. The 10 amp was on the immersion heater and needed to be so because that was 2 kilowatt, and the 6 amp was on my mains electric, which was only giving me about 1.3 kilowatts of electricity to use for my appliances, which was rather low. It was difficult to run a hairdryer or a decent iron, which caused me problems. But by changing the immersion heater from 2 kilowatt to 1 kilowatt enabled me to switch the circuits around. So now the 1 kilowatt immersion heater is protected by the 6 amp, and the other circuit, the mains power circuit, is protected by 10 amp, which gives me 2.3 kilowatts of power, which has made a tremendous difference to the way I do things on the boat, and it has allowed me to buy a 2 kilowatt iron. Many irons are graded at 2.4 kilowatts and above, but I just couldn't use one of those. I'd been buying lower powered irons, which quite frankly were useless. So at least I managed to sort that out as a byproduct of changing the immersion heater. When I fitted the new immersion heater, I had a problem because the immersion heater spanner was not a good fit over the big nut. I managed to get out the old immersion and I managed to get the new one in, but I had trouble tightening it. I thought I had it tight, but even having got it tight, I realised it was still leaking. So I ordered another immersion heater spanner online, and I had to wait a few days for that to come. Now the new spanner was a good fit. It went straight over the immersion heater fitting. The other one you had to play about with it to even get it on because it was far too tight. But with the new immersion heater spanner, I was able to turn the immersion heater another whole quarter turn, and that solved my problem. So as you will have seen, been a few problems in 2018. Nothing major, fortunately, just niggly little things that happen. I did some painting on the boat, as I explained. That is something I will be doing more of in 2019. Having the boat one colour is perhaps not very exciting, but it does allow me to touch the boat up and do the work myself. The finish may not be like it is on some absolutely top-notch boats, but I think it's good that I can cope with a lot of those sort of jobs myself. And whilst I've done the handrails and things, I will need to give them another coat, so I'll be looking more closely this year at the boat generally. When the finer weather comes along, I will be attempting to do some more painting. The roof needs to be painted. I'll be doing it outside. I won't be going undercover or anything like that. What I haven't mentioned is the length of the boat. The boat is actually 45 foot long. The length of the boat is quite important for several reasons, because many of your costs are based on length. For example, your canal and river trust license is based on the length of the boat. Your mooring costs in a marina are based on the length of the boat. Any painting costs generally based on the length of the boat. Certainly when I had the blacking done, that was based on the length of the boat. I had originally wanted to get a boat that was 45 to 50 foot long. I found this one 45 foot long. It suited my purpose. I liked the layout inside and so forth. So I'm quite pleased that I was able to get this boat, and I've enjoyed my first year aboard. Well, I hope you've enjoyed that sort of look back at my first year. As I say, it wasn't really looking at what I've done cruising wise, it was a look back at those things that hadn't quite gone as I would have liked, sorting out some niggly little bits and pieces. If you have enjoyed watching, please like and comment, and if you haven't already done so, please subscribe. I look forward to bringing you further videos this year, and I hope you'll look out for those. Meanwhile, thanks again for watching, and bye for now.